It's Monday, November 12th, and this is Fox and Friends First, happening right now at 4 a.m. here on the East Coast. A Fox News alert for you. Out-of-control wildfires in California, ravaging thousands of acres, claiming dozens of lives. The race against time is happening right now as crews fight the fast-moving flames fueled by raging winds. We're live on the ground.
Somehow they came up with 93,000 votes after election night. We still don't know how they came up with that.
And recounts underway overnight. New tallies being conducted in the Sunshine State. What Republicans are doing to ensure that every ballot is protected. And a patriotic homecoming just in time for Veterans Day, the heartwarming holiday surprise that will make your morning. Fox and Friends First starts right now. Moving in here in New York City, a cold one this morning. You're watching Fox and Friends First. I'm Heather Childers. Thank you so much for starting your day with us. Well, let's head down to Florida, though. All eyes are on Florida as Governor Rick Scott's campaign announces 3 more lawsuits against county election officials. Well, he's accusing his opponent, I should say, of trying to commit voter fraud as the ballot recount gets off to a rocky start. Griff Jenkins is live for us inside the Broward County Office of Elections with some details. Good morning, Griff.
Good morning, Heather. No sleep for the election officials or lawyers here in Broward County. Let me just show you around. This is the election office headquarters, and you see attorneys for the Republicans and Democrats in here. The Board of Canvass members is also in session. They have to be here along with court reporters. But this is really the most interesting part of it. If you look in here, this is the actual recount, if you will. 10 machines in there. 2 more are being brought in. Let me just quickly tell you a little bit about what's happening. What's happening right now is they're actually separating the first page before the actual recount of votes begins. And the reason why that is because they want to find out what number of total votes there are. Attorneys tell me it's just over 700,000. But part of Governor Scott's lawsuit is against the supervisor here, Brenda Snipes, and it's relevant to that total number of vote counts. Yesterday, I spoke to the lead attorneys for both the Democrats and the Republicans about the supervisor here, Dr. Brenda Snipes. Here is what they had to say.
Brenda Snipes might be underpersoned and might have too much thrust upon her suddenly. I don't think there's anyone who thinks she is dishonest or lacks integrity.
She allowed felons to vote. There were 30 of them that came in that people voted twice. If somebody cheats and commits a felony, should their first vote count? I don't think so. I think they ought to strike them all. But it's, welcome to sunny Broward County.
Now, Dr. Snipes and her canvassing Monday with Chris Wallace, here's a little bit of what he had to say.
Somehow they came up with 93,000 votes after election night. We still don't know how they came up with that. I've asked the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to go in and do an investigation to find out what happened here. But we clearly know the judges have already said they clearly violated the law.
And Senator Nelson responding in a statement saying that Scott's worried that when all the votes are counted, he'll lose the election. We will not allow him, Scott that is, to undermine the democratic process, and we will use every legal tool available to protect the rights of Florida voters. But what is of all eyes in Broward County right now, Heather, is, and I'll give you one last look, and that is the counting of these ballots. Now, once they separate that first page I talked about, they'll begin the actual count, but it's going to take upwards of 80 to possibly 90 hours to run these machines. But if that number is well over the 700,000 when they count the first pages, it's going to be a storm breaking out here in the next couple of days. Heather?
And what is the deadline they have to get that done?
So the deadline for the second unofficial count is Thursday, the 15th, and they're hopeful they're going to meet that. We'll find out what happens if they don't.
All right, Griff, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Always working. Speaking of people not getting sleep. Well, Republicans are questioning the integrity of the Florida recount, pointing to inconsistencies or instances like Democratic lawyers fighting to count votes from illegal immigrants. Founder of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, says that he's not surprised that this development isn't getting a whole lot of media attention.
My favorite part of this whole thing, which has not received basically any media coverage, is that lawyers for the Gillum campaign and the Nelson campaign objected to non-citizens' votes not being counted. Now, first of all, non-citizens shouldn't even be allowed near voting at all. Right. Second of all, the lawyers for these campaigns objected. They said, object, object, and this got some, social media coverage yesterday. Right. But this is where this is headed, Steve, where all of a sudden there's going to be a movement to get non-citizens to be allowed representation in our democratic elections. But I think Congressman Gates hit it right out of the park. They lost. They lost in 2016, and they went all in for Florida. They really thought they could turn Florida blue, and because of President Trump and his multiple rallies in the state, the little blue, faucet, kind of with a little drip hit a very, very big red wall.
Well, the results of the recount are due, as we just said, by this Thursday, November 15th. And Griff said they hope to reach that deadline. Well, breaking overnight, some other stories are following. 2 American fighter pilots are rescued after their jet crashes into the Philippine Sea. The Navy pilots ejected from their FA-18 because of a mechanical issue during a routine exercise. Rescue crews from the nearby USS Ronald Reagan immediately brought them to safety. The Navy says both pilots are in good condition. Well, President Trump waking up at the White House after a weekend in France. The president and First Lady Melania joining more than 70 world leaders to mark 100 years since the end of World War I. The commander-in-chief also honoring fallen American troops at a military ceremony.
The American and French patriots of World War I embody the timeless virtues of our 2 republics. It is our duty to preserve the civilization they defended and to protect the peace they so nobly gave their lives to secure.
Well, President Trump did not meet with Russian leader Vladimir Putin in Paris. Putin says that French officials requested the 2 world leaders not interact. Vice President Pence set to land in Tokyo at any moment. He is flying to Japan after spending Veterans Day with American troops in Alaska. The VP is expected to put China's feet to the fire and reassure American allies during his trip overseas.
Our message is going to be to all these nations in the world that we're committed to continuing to build on our trading relationships across this region. We'll make critical announcements on this trip.
Vice President Pence will meet with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe before departing for key summits in Singapore and New Guinea. Well, some top officials firing back at Democrats who want to tighten the screws on acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker. Many on the left threatening to subpoena him. Todd Pyro joins us now live with more on the Democrats' latest attempts to derail the Russia probe. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning to you, Heather. Those calls for a subpoena coming in response to Whitaker's previous statements as a commentator, including comments about cutting Robert Mueller's budget as a way to end the probe, that investigating President Trump's finances was, quote, a red line, and that there was no collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. Here's Kellyanne Conway defending Whitaker during an interview on Fox News Sunday.
If you're talking about Matt Whitaker's statements as a private citizen a year and a half ago, when the Mueller investigation first started, what he has said on cable TV, I don't think that disqualifies somebody from being the chief law enforcement officer at the Department of Justice, which is an executive function.
Conway went on to add that it would be a mistake to shut down the Mueller probe at this point because the White House has been compliant with regard to everything that was promised. But that wasn't enough to stop the threats from Democrats like Adam Schiff.
I want to make this very clear. If he doesn't recuse himself, if he has any involvement whatsoever in this Russia probe, we are going to find out whether he made commitments to the president about the probe, whether he is serving as a back channel to the president or his lawyers about the probe, whether he's doing anything to interfere with the probe.
Keep in mind that a Department of Justice spokesperson added that Whitaker was someone that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein called, quote, a superb choice. This is the same person, Whitaker, that Nancy Pelosi says should recuse himself. Politics as usual, Heather.
All right. Todd Pyro. Yep, as usual. Thank you very much. Well, a couple more political election-type stories to talk about. Republican Brian Kemp calling on Democrat Stacey Abrams to concede in the race for Georgia governor. He says that her refusal is a, quote, disgrace to democracy. Abrams filing a federal lawsuit to delay the certification of votes to Wednesday. The current deadline is tomorrow. Her campaign claims thousands of ballots may not have been counted properly. Kemp is ahead by nearly 60,000 votes and says it is mathematically impossible for Abrams to force the runoff that she is pushing for. Meanwhile, Democrat Kristen Sinema's lead over Republican Martha McSally is growing. The heated Arizona Senate race still too close to call. Sinema leads by about 32,000 votes, a margin her campaign says is insurmountable. Election officials say that there's still more than 219,000 ballots that have not yet been counted. Well, let's switch gears. The NFL honoring our nation's veterans around the league. The league showing their support with tributes before and during games. Teams also wearing military-themed gear. Former President George W. Bush flipping the coin before the Dallas Cowboys hurled the Eagles in Philly. Minutes after the top of the hour, and the Florida Senate and governor races now in a recount. Our next guest warned the state years ago about Broward County's election swamp. Florida law professor Tim Canova tells us why we should be skeptical of the vote count there. World War I. Love seeing these pictures. And then thank you to World War II veteran Carl Steiben for his service. Thank you to all who have served. We'll be right back. Recounting chaos is rocking Florida as Governor Rick Scott slams his Democratic opponent Rick Nelson for trying to, quote, steal the Senate seat, filing a new lawsuit to secure the ballots. And all eyes are back on Broward County, which our next guest is calling an election swamp, having sued the supervisor there and won. Joining us now is Florida law professor and former independent congressional candidate Tim Canova. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So tell us about your personal experience dealing with Broward County specifically.
Sure. I ran for Congress in 2016 in a Democratic primary against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And after the election, we tried to verify the vote by inspecting the ballots. Long and short of it is I had to sue Brenda Snipes, the supervisor of elections, a close ally, I should say, of Wasserman Schultz. In fact, they campaigned together just a couple of weeks ago. And I sued. We won. We showed that she destroyed the ballots. That's violations of federal and state criminal statutes. Some are felonies punishable by up to 5 years in prison. She lied to the court and really conspired with her own staff to commit these crimes.
So
At the time,
So hearing you say that, this was, 2016, she'd violated numerous state and federal statutes, punishable as felonies with up to 5 years in prison. Why is she still in charge?
That's a great question, and I called on Governor Scott many months ago to fire her, to conduct a criminal investigation, and not just Governor Scott, reached out to the Florida Attorney General, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. The U.S. Attorney could not be bothered. I mean, these are federal offenses as well, and I warned at the time if they didn't prosecute her, if they didn't remove her from office, she would be just a walking felon. There'd be a moral hazard problem. She would engage in this kind of illegal activity in the future, and that we would lose faith and confidence in our elections. And all of that has come to pass. There's nobody that can guarantee to me, to my satisfaction, that she didn't destroy more ballots in this election or create new ballots, or that she didn't rig the machines. We've seen how easy it is for an 11-year-old girl to rig the machines. We've had reports of that in recent weeks. And Wasserman Schultz herself famously boasted that they have many ways of rigging elections.
And
well, we'd like to really know what happened.
Yeah, as we talk about this, I want to bring up the latest numbers that we have for everyone. And in the Senate race between Scott and Nelson, there's a difference of about 0.16%, and then in the governor, there's about a difference between DeSantis and Gillum of 0.4%. What do you think needs to happen in order for people to be confident that their vote is counting?
Well, I'll tell you, I think this recount, whoever comes out on the losing end, half of the voters of this state are going to feel that it's a rigged election. I think there's plenty of grounds to actually start talking about invalidating this election. We've seen breakdowns in the chain of custody of paper ballots. With somebody who has the record that Brenda Snipes does, to have engaged in these kinds of deceitful, dishonest, illegal activity, I say invalidate the election and have a revote. Now, it's more complicated to do it statewide for the governor's race and the Senate race, but I'll tell you, candidates in Broward County have no confidence. I have no confidence that I lost legitimately a week or two ago. In fact, you know, we left Snipes in office. Instead of punishing her, she punished me. The vote total I got was laughable. I mean, really almost a joke. And I'm not surprised. And, you know, I think we should talk about invalidating the election and revoting. I think that would be the only way to have real legitimacy going forward for whoever is going to win.
And you originally ran as a Democrat. Because of all this, the result of it, you became an independent.
Well, that's true. I reached out to the Democratic Party leaders in Broward County, Miami-Dade, and Tallahassee, and none of them would even respond to my request to join me in calling for an investigation. But the Republicans were no better. Rick Scott was, you know, just completely silent on all of this when he had the power to do something about it. And to tell you the truth, I wrote to every member of Congress, of the House and Senate, and got not a single response. So, you know, the political class doesn't mind stolen elections when it doesn't happen to them, when it's just a progressive challenger to a powerful incumbent. Now suddenly they all wake up to the fact that, my God, we've got somebody who's conducting elections in Broward County who can't be trusted.
I mean, you know, we will see what happens for sure, but a lot of people talking about it. Maybe something will happen this time. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Heather.
All right. The time now is about 20 minutes after the top of the hour. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell.
Well, President Trump is known for his America First policies and an avid supporter of nationalism.
Patriotism is the exact opposite of nationalism. Nationalism is a betrayal of patriotism.
And on a day known for bringing peace and an end to World War I, French President Emmanuel Macron insults President Trump and his nationalist views. Joining us now to discuss is Macron's latest jab and the true meaning of nationalism is President of Security Studies Group and a U.S. Army Special Forces veteran, Jim Hansen. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it on this day of all days.
Good to be with you, Heather.
So you say that Macron is wrong, bottom line.
And he is. I mean, he's factually inaccurate about the meaning of both nationalism and patriotism, I guess. He wants to say it's the opposite of and a betrayal of patriotism, but they are extremely closely linked. Patriotism is a love and shared values for your country, and nationalism is putting those into action as a governing principle. Now, I don't understand how you could say that's the opposite. It was a rude jab and an unnecessary thing to do, given President Trump recently saying that he's a nationalist.
So what do you think Macron's reasoning would be to do this?
I think there is a feeling among some of our European friends that the United States, with President Trump's America First policies and some of the things he's done, that our nationalism is a little bit too muscular and aggressive and doesn't sit well with their globalist view. They want the U.S. to be another member of the global community and fall into line. And Trump's done things like pull out of the Paris Climate Accords and tell the rest of the Europeans that they need to pull their weight in NATO and other places. That doesn't sit well with him, and I think this was his chance to take a jab at the president when he couldn't, fight back.
And then you also said that patriotism leans toward the ideals and the values and nationalism that the country, to the country itself.
Yeah, and I think what it is, it's a question of, is your country's values and is the governing principles for your country worthy of being put forth as your governing principles externally as well? I mean, it's funny, it's hypocritical for Macron because the French love to push the idea that the French language should stay in diplomacy. They force NATO to use it and a bunch of other things in a very nationalistic way. And so to say that somehow the U.S., as the exceptional nation, as the example of individual liberty and freedom, should not put our values forth and should not put America first is absurd. It's not a dangerous thing. It's not like we're trying to take over the world. We're simply saying that our country is good enough to stand up for.
Yeah, and since we have that up as you're speaking, you also point out that white and black nationalism, that is all hate, but that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about an America First policy.
And that's a perversion of nationalism. The idea that you would organize a state around an ethnic group only, around a race only, and exclude other people with hate in mind is an exact perversion of nationalism. You know, it can be used that way, and the one excuse Macron had was that nationalistic tendencies were serving as part of the cause for World War I. But the idea that that alone, and that is a reason to say that nationalism is no good, is absurd. It was something that he shouldn't have done. And I think we can go ahead and say that nationalism by itself is a good thing.
All right. Jim Hansen, thank you so much for joining us.
To our shores to get, because they're under the thumb of government-run health care in Canada and England. Instead, our guys run to the hills. That needs to change, and that's what we're going to be working to do.
We'll be right back.
To celebrate the Grinch movie,
This is a Fox News alert. I'm Anita Vogel. The death toll from the devastating wildfire in Northern California has grown to 29, matching the deadliest wildfire in the state's recorded history. The so-called Camp Fire incinerated the town of Paradise, practically wiping it off the map. Authorities there announcing that the remains of 6 more victims were found today and that there are 228 people still unaccounted for. At least 5 search teams are combing through the ruins of the town, aided by a mobile DNA lab and a team of anthropologists. Another fire in Southern California killed 2 people in Malibu, bringing the statewide death toll up to 31. Gusty winds overnight and into Monday are expected to challenge firefighters who are battling to contain the fires burning in both ends of the state. I'm Anita Vogel. Now let's go back to life, liberty, and Levin.
I'm back with Chip Roy and Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan. So the President of the United States, through his Chief of Staff, tells the Attorney General he wants his resignation. The Attorney General is a very decent man, a good man, and by the way, may run again for his old seat. And I think he's an excellent senator. There may have been a mismatch in terms of the Department of Justice. And so they appoint his Chief of Staff, a former U.S. attorney, to be the acting Attorney General. So first we have these so-called experts on TV saying, "Oh, that's not right. You got to follow succession." Well, of course that's wrong. So he's the acting Attorney General. Then we get the gaggle of leftists out there saying it's a constitutional crisis unless the acting Attorney General recuses himself from the investigation. The acting Attorney General had nothing to do with anything. Why should he recuse himself? He shouldn't. And meanwhile, Rosenstein is there with all kinds of conflicts. Can you explain that to me?
You're right. Mr. Whitaker should not recuse himself. Mr. Rosenstein has a conflict he's had from the very beginning.
What is that?
He wrote the memo that became the basis for firing James Comey, that the left says, oh, that's obstruction of justice. Mr. Rosenstein is now overseeing the special counsel whom he appointed, Robert Mueller, and Robert Mueller is looking into, was there obstruction of justice into the firing of James Comey? You've got to be kidding me. And we've pointed this out for, this is why—
he's a witness.
Of course. We've pointed this out from day one. But Mr. Rosenstein, no, it's all fine. The other problem with Rod Rosenstein is we've asked for the McCabe memos. Sorry, you're not going to see them. They've even been subpoenaed by Congress. We've asked to see parts of the FISA. Sorry, we're not going to show it, even though everyone in Congress has a clearance. We've asked to see the Bruce Orr 302s. We've asked to see Jim Baker, former—
Let me see. The 302s are the FBI interview notes.
Yeah, those are the notes when Bruce Orr, whose wife worked for the company, who hired Christopher Steele, who put together—
You know all this is going to come to an end.
Well, that's why we got a lot of work to do between now and the first of the year when the.
But my question is this: just as your former federal prosecutor, just as a constitutional, rational matter, why would an acting Attorney General have to recuse himself? Because the Democrats demand that he recuses himself.
No, well, the Democrats are the same people. I saw something yesterday where Elizabeth Warren is saying this is a constitutional crisis. You remember in June of 2017, it was a crisis because Jeff Sessions, was the Attorney General. I mean, they can't get any of their stories straight, right? They're looking for a crisis where there isn't one, and unfortunately ignore the ones where there are problems. And that's what we've seen time and time again. And frankly, it's partly, though, why I think the American people are so frustrated is seeing this continued pursuit, continued coming down a rabbit trail, and instead of focusing on the issues they care about. None of this is making anybody's lives better, taking care of their health care, taking care of food on their plates, making sure they've got jobs and food and shelter and clothing. All of this is D.C. being the swamp at its worst.
Here's one other thing, though, guys, about Rod Rosenstein. It's alleged that he said he was going to wear a wire and record the commander-in-chief of our great country. It's alleged that he was talking about the 25th Amendment, all in that critical time frame between March 9th, when his memo was the basis for firing James Comey, and March 17th of 2017, when he named Bob Mueller. This is all supposed to have happened in that time frame, and he won't answer our questions. That is wrong.
They talk about the Saturday Night Massacre. This is like I want the younger viewers now, like the Saturday Night Massacre. Now, in the Saturday Night Massacre, Richard, you know, at least it's getting better. They've been comparing our president to Hitler. Now they're comparing him to Nixon. So, you know, we're moving down the line here. So, but the Saturday Night Massacre, Nixon ordered his attorney general to fire the special counsel, Archibald Cox. He refused and resigned. Then he ordered the deputy attorney general. He refused and he resigned.
Right.
Next in line, he directed Robert Bork, the solicitor of the United States. He said, look, I don't agree with it, but somebody has to do it. He is the president. He is the executive branch, and he fired him. That's why they kept him off the Supreme Court, by the way. Has the President of the United States ordered anybody to fire Mr. Mueller?
He said just the opposite. He said just the opposite. Let him complete his investigation, because there's nothing there. And guess what? There's nothing there. There has been not one bit of evidence to show any type of coordination, collusion, conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia's influence the election. But we know the Clinton campaign, like I said before, hired the law firm, who hired Fusion, who hired Christopher Steele, a foreigner, who then went and did what? Talk to Russians to do what? Put together a fake dossier that was the basis. This is what just, I cannot believe this happened in our country, was the basis for the FBI going to a secret court to get a warrant so they could spy on the other campaign. And the Democrats say, oh, nothing there. What? Are you kidding me?
Chip Roy, what about the media's role here? The media clearly, they can't disguise it anymore. They've sided with one political party against the other. They obviously are very excited about what the Democrats are going to do. I mean, after the election, it was clear the Democrats were taking the House. Jake Tapper on CNN excitedly and repeatedly was talking about all the subpoenas that are going to fly, and maybe the I word, impeachment, will be brought up. And so they definitely have the media on their side. We saw this press conference the other day where CNN's representative, Jim Acosta, literally was trying to disrupt and sabotage the press conference. The purpose of a presidential press conference is for we, the people, to find out what's going on, not for people to become provocative and make news. So you guys, the Republicans in that, you're not going to have the press, most of the press on your side. But hasn't that always been the case?
Look, there's no question that there's been bias in media. I mean, I grew up as a child in the Reagan era, and I remember watching all these press briefings. You have Sam Donaldson sitting there sparring with Ronald Reagan and so forth. But I think there is a certain edge to today's media that is a little different even, and it's even worse. What we saw with Acosta, it's terrible, but Acosta is all about himself. The White House for him is a prop. Right? He's using that to leverage and promote himself. It's not about journalism and seeking the truth. He's making opinion news. He doesn't even need to be in the White House in order to do what he does, right? He can opine about it from the back benches somewhere. The reality is that they're using this for a show and to prop themselves up instead of honoring their responsibility in a free press and a democracy to seek the truth wherever it may go.
Well, that press conference on the media was an absolute disgrace. And they disgraced themselves in front, not just the country, but the entire world. And it is not their job to disrupt a press conference. They can ask tough questions, and also to push away, and he did push away the White House intern, and so it was really quite disgraceful. We'll be right back. Jim Jordan, immigration is a big issue, but apparently not to the majority in the House. But it's still a big issue to the majority in the Senate. So I assume nothing will come out of the House of Representatives under the Democrats to secure the border, because they believe that helps them electorally and every other way, and they actually want to change the nature of the electorate and the voter and turn some of these purple states blue and red states purple. Is there anything that can be done in the House or anything the Senate can do?
Well, we'll see. I would argue it's also a majority issue, too, for the majority of the country. It's a big issue. Look, I think it's tough because remember where they're at. Their leader of their party, Secretary Clinton, said she wants a borderless hemisphere. That many of their members have said they want to abolish ICE and never secure the border. It's tough to work with. I mean, Chip said it best earlier. One of the things that defines you as a nation is you have boundaries and borders. Part of being a sovereign nation is you should be able to control your border. The idea that one major party in our country doesn't want to do that, it's tough to work with them. So I guess we can if they see the light and actually want to have a border security wall, secure the border, have it happen in a legal way. But it's tough. And you think about every issue, from chain migration, asylum reform, sanctuary cities, the whole visa lottery, all those things, they're not with us there. So it's going to be tough. That's why elections are so important.
Let me make a suggestion to you on this. When Reagan was president, he never had the House of Representatives. He shut down the government 6 times on key issues that he wanted to take care of. The MX missile, the Trident missile, other things. And he got a lot of what he wanted. And he went over the head of the Democrats in the House, and he spoke to the American people directly. If the President of the United States wants to secure that border, and these spending bills come, massive spending. Mitch McConnell was very proud of himself the other day that they were getting all these appropriations bills, bigger spending than any time in American history. And the Republicans better watch this. Isn't it time to say, okay, now this is what I want, and this is what we're going to do, or we will shut down the government, and when we shut it down, we'll win more elections, because that is the pattern. The president takes charge, shuts it down, the American people see leadership, they want that border secured. Isn't that, in other words, we're not without power.
Absolutely. I mean, I was proud to be Senator Cruz's chief of staff in 2013 and work with Jim and a lot of great folks in the House to try to make sure that we stood up to defund Obamacare, because we knew it was going to cause premiums to go up, and they've doubled and tripled since. So I'm proud of what we tried to do there. And frankly, we would have succeeded if some folks hadn't run to the hills crying in the corner saying that shutting down the government is somehow, going to cost us elections, when in fact it doesn't. It caused us to gain seats then in 2014. It caused us to be able to win the presidency in 2016. Immigration is one of those issues that we need to turn back around on the Democrats. I'm tired of letting them take the high ground in their opinion that somehow they're pro-immigrant, when the worst thing they can do is, in the false name of compassion, in open borders, have women and children getting sold into the sex trafficking business, have women riding on the top of train cars, empowering the cartels because we refuse to do our basic job as a sovereign nation and secure our border. Well, we need to turn that back around on the Democrats. It is they who have blood on their hands with what is happening on the border to these children and these kids. And by the way, go down and spend a day on the border. Let's have hearings down in Laredo, Texas. Let's talk to the Border Patrol Union, who's down there, who endorsed me in my campaign, and I was proud of it. The 72 miles of the Laredo sector, how many miles of that do you think have not just a fence, but have even a road that's navigable along the Rio Grande? 2 miles. They can't see the river because the cane is too thick. They don't have cell signals. They don't have radio signals. They don't have operational control of the border. The cartels do, and it's because we refuse to do our job.
So
Let's stick that back around on the Democrats.
How do we fix it? And to me, the answer is take it to them.
Yeah. Remember, this Congress, the one time the government was shut down is when Chuck Schumer said amnesty was more important than funding our troops. And the American people 2 days later said, you're crazy. And he said, Shazam, I'm going to open the government back up. He got the message.
But then we didn't take advantage of it.
We blew our chance just a few weeks later on the big spending bill. We could have got the border security wall if we'd have been willing to engage in the debate. And after all, we got a guy in the White House who's pretty good at communicating with the American people. Pretty darn good at it. And if we engage the president, or the president engages and we're unified in doing this, we can win some of these things.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, almost every weeknight you can watch me on Levin TV, Levin TV. Go to crtv.com/Mark and sign up, crtv.com/Mark, or give us a call at 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV. We'll be right back.
At Athene,
with a majority in the House and a bigger Republican majority in the Senate, our president, he just has to adjust the president on how he manages Congress. But he does have tools in his toolkit. We just talked about no bill is a law until he signs it. No appropriation is made until he agrees to it. Almost nothing happens. You guys in Congress, soon to be, you look up there at the White House, you look at a very, very powerful position. The White House looks back at Congress, they say, well, these are very, very powerful people. Here's the thing. Chuck Schumer's not the smartest guy in the world. This amnesty thing blew up in his face, and the Kavanaugh situation blew up in his face. The president helped us win seats, so did Chuck Schumer. But for Chuck Schumer, the radical left in the Senate, the whole Kavanaugh thing wouldn't have happened. Same with the House of Representatives. The radicals are now in charge of every single committee, L.A., San Francisco, Baltimore, Manhattan. You know, there's a big country in between, and they're going to be watching too. These aren't the brightest light bulbs either. So there are governing opportunities for the minority in the House, and there's certainly governing opportunities for the president and the majority in the Senate. Here's my concern. Unless they're willing to institute these battles, I look at the Senate. Mitch McConnell's there. He always goes out, we're not going to shut down the government. Then he's taken the most powerful tool a president has away from him to control and direct spending when he has a House of Representatives that's hostile to him. How do you think this is going to play out?
Well, I think it is a mistake if Senate leadership takes those tools off the table. That's precisely what they did in 2013, which led us to have to back away from where we were in trying to defund Obamacare. Keep those tools on the table so that we can win the argument and force the question, call the question. Let's take these things to the American people and not be afraid to run on the things that and try to execute the things that we're running on. I think spending is a core issue that we can focus on right now. We failed to balance the budget and do our job when Republicans had control of the House. Now let's get busy doing our job and focus on balancing the budget. And we can do that and force the question if the president and the Senate Republicans will make us do that.
Yeah, no one wants a government shutdown. The only one who's done it this Congress is Chuck Schumer. But why is it when we're standing up doing what we were elected to do, what the American people sent the president here to do, what they sent Congress members here to do, why is that somehow shutting down the government? This is I don't want it. No one wants it. But I do want to do what we were sent here to do. I do want to do what they told us that we should do when they gave us the privilege to come serve. So let's have that debate. All too often, Chip's right, all too often what we do is we don't even engage in the debate. Let's have the debate. I think we can win because we got common sense and the truth on our side.
And isn't the evidence that doing the right thing is politically smart too?
Absolutely. Every single time.
And I'll even go further, that doing conservative things are politically smart too?
Yeah.
A lot of the Republicans who lost these House races were not conservatives. They ran away from their principles. They were trying to cut the baby in half. They were imitating sort of soft Democrats, if you will. And so the base may not have turned out. All this talk about females in the suburbs, I think a lot of these people who lost is because conservatives, they may have voted in the Senate, they may have voted for governors, but they said, what the hell is the House doing?
Never hurts to do what you said. Never hurts to keep your promises. And when we do that, it's good politics. More importantly, it's good for the country.
Works every time.
We'll be right back. Chip Roy, Jim Jordan, one question. Chip, are you optimistic about the next 2 years or not?
I'm absolutely optimistic because I believe in the American people. And I believe that if you empower the American people and if we allow states to agree to disagree, allow Texas to be Texas, allow California to be California, and we work together to empower the people, we'll succeed every time. 1,000 people a day are moving to Texas because of freedom, because Texas is leading the world in oil and gas exploration and job creation, and it's the place to survive. And I had a woman came up to me and said, you've got to win this election, Chip, because we need to save Texas from Washington, because I moved here from California 2 weeks ago. And I got that on the trail all the time, and I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're Americans. Of course you're optimistic. Greatest country ever. There's a scripture verse I love, 2 Timothy 4:7. Paul says, fight the good fight, finish the course, keep the faith. I believe the vast majority of this country believes that verse. Fight, finish, keep. We keep doing those things, we're going to be just fine. We're going to continue to be best country ever.
And I have a different Bible verse. An eye for an eye.
Why does that not surprise me?
Don't forget it. Chip Roy, a pleasure.
Thank you,
Good luck
sir.
to you in the House.
Thank you.
Jim Jordan, go get him.
You bet. Thanks.
See you next time on Life, Liberty, and Levin.